November 11th, 1943, 8:30 hours, 20,000 feet above the volcanic peaks of Rabaul, New Britain. The air up here is thin, freezing, and smells of burnt oil and cordite. Below, the tropical jungle of Rabaul is a lush green carpet, but up here, it is a gray arena of death. Warrant Officer Kudo adjusts his grip on the control stick of his Mitsubishi A6M Zero. The vibration of the Sake 21 radial engine hums through his bones, a familiar, comforting rhythm. For 2 years, this machine has been the undisputed king of the Pacific. It is the katana of the skies, lightweight, hyper-agile, and lethal. To fly, it is to dance. To fight, it is to die. Kudo scans the horizon. The sun glints off the canopy. There, a formation of dark blue specks against the towering cumulus clouds. American Navy fighters. A smirk touches Kudo's lips beneath his oxygen mask. He's seen them before. The Americans fly the F6F Wildcat stubby, slow, barrel-shaped planes that struggle to turn. They are prey. But as the specks grow larger, something feels off. These aren't the tubby Wildcats. These silhouettes are larger. Squared-off wingtips. A wider stance. They look heavy, bloated, like a factory worker trying to wear a sprinter's shoes. Kudo signals his wingman. Attack. The Zeros peel off in a fluid, synchronized dive. The G-forces press Kudo into his seat, but the Zero handles it with grace. He closes the distance in seconds. The American formation, these new strange planes, seems to lumber through the air. Indifferent to the deadly falcons diving upon them, Kudo lines up his sights on the trailing fighter. It's a massive target. It looks like a flying brick compared to the elegant curves of his Mitsubishi. He thinks of the briefings back at base. Intelligence said the Americans were rushing a new design to the front. Heavy, the reports claimed. Sluggish. The Japanese pilots laughed in the mess hall. How could the Americans be so foolish? In a dogfight, weight is death. Agility is life. Kudo's thumb hovers over the trigger. He is 200 yards out, the perfect kill zone. He squeezes. The Zero shudders as the twin 20mm Type 99 cannons and 7.7mm machine guns erupt. Tracers arc through the sky, stitching a line of fire across the dark blue fuselage of the American plane. Thud, thud, crack. Kudo sees the impacts. Debris flies off the American's right wing. He sees the spark of cannon shells detonating against the metal skin near the cockpit. He pulls up, banking hard to the left, expecting the familiar sight. A fireball. A trail of black smoke, a plane spiraling into the jungle below. That is the rule of engagement. When a Zero bites, the prey bleeds. But as Kudo levels off and looks back, his breath catches in his throat. The blue plane isn't spinning. It isn't burning. It's turning. And it's turning fast. The flying brick shakes off the 20mm cannon hits as if they were pebbles thrown at a tank. The smoke trails dissipate. The engine of the American fighter roars a deep, guttural growl that drowns out the whine of the Zero. This isn't a wounded animal. It's an angry one. Kudo blinks, trying to process the impossibility of physics he is witnessing. He hit the fuel tanks. He knows he did. The Zero, with its lack of armor and unprotected tanks, would have turned into a Roman candle with a hit like that. Why is the American still flying? Panic, cold and sharp, pricks at the back of his neck. The American plane, the Grumman F6F Hellcat, banks aggressively. Its nose swings around with terrifying authority. The pilot isn't fleeing. He is coming for Kudo. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, the hunter feels exposed. Kudo slams the throttle forward, relying on the Zero's legendary climb rate to escape. He pulls the stick back, aiming for the sun, expecting to leave the heavy American beast gasping in the lower atmosphere. But the beast keeps pace. The Hellcat climbs. Its 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine drags that heavy frame upward with brute industrial force. It doesn't dance. It powers through the air, tearing the sky apart. Kudo looks over his shoulder. The dark blue nose is growing larger. The 6.50 caliber machine guns mounted in the Hellcat's folding wings wink with muzzle flashes. Dock dash, dock dash, dock dash, dock dash, dock dash, dock. The sound is different from the Japanese guns. It's a jackhammer rhythm, a storm of lead. Kudo jinks right, then left, relying on the Zero's feather-light ailerons. But the Hellcat pilot anticipates him. The American doesn't need to outturn the Zero. He just waits for the intersection, absorbs the punishment, and hammers back. A stream of tracers tears past Kudo's canopy. The sheer volume of fire is overwhelming. This isn't a dogfight anymore. It's a bludgeoning. Kudo realizes with a sickening drop in his stomach that the laughter in the mess hall was a mistake. They weren't fighting a heavier Wildcat. They were fighting something entirely new. A machine built not for elegance, but for survival. A machine that could take a samurai's sword to the chest and keep standing. The arrogance of the Imperial Navy is burning away, second by second, in the cold air above Rabaul. And as the Hellcat's shadow falls over Kudo's cockpit, he realizes the era of the Zero is over. But he has one trick left. A desperate maneuver that has saved him a dozen times before. He cuts the throttle and drops his flaps, trying to force the faster, heavier American to overshoot seconds later. The airspeed indicator drops to 110 knots. Kudo's maneuver is textbook. By cutting the throttle and dropping his flaps, he turns his Zero into a kite. The drag is instant. He is betting his life on the laws of inertia, hoping the heavy American plane, carrying too much speed and too much weight, will hurtle past him like a runaway train. It works. The Hellcat, massive and blue, roars over Kudo's canopy, so close he can see the rivets on the aluminum skin. The American pilot's head is turned, looking down at him. Kudo slams the throttle back to full military power. The Sakai engine screams in protest, but the Zero responds instantly, its nose snapping up. The hunter has become the hunted. Kudo has the American's tail. This is the moment every Japanese pilot lives for. The clean shot. He presses the trigger again. Get him. His remaining 20mm shells smash into the Hellcat's fuselage and tail section. He sees pieces of the rudder fly off. He sees the canopy glass crack. But the Hellcat doesn't explode. It doesn't spiral. It doesn't even smoke. The American plane shudders under the impact, absorbing the blows like a heavyweight boxer taking a jab to the ribs. Inside that cockpit, the American pilot is sitting in a literal bathtub of hardened steel armor plating. The fuel tanks, wrapped in layers of rubber and chemical compounds, self-seal the moment the bullets pass through, choking off any fire before it can start. Kudo screams into his mask. Fall. Why won't you fall? He is so fixated on the unkillable beast in front of him that he forgets the second rule of this new war. The Americans don't fight like samurai. They fight like a pack of wolves. A shadow flickers across his instrument panel. Kudo looks up and his blood runs cold. While he was focused on the lead Hellcat, its wingman had already positioned himself high and to the right, waiting for this exact moment. The bait had been taken. The trap had been sprung. The second Hellcat dives. It's the thatch weave in motion, a tactic designed specifically to counter the Zero's turning ability. While one American drags the Zero into a vulnerable position, the other cuts across to deliver the death blow. There is no elegance in what happens next. It is sheer industrial violence. 6 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns open up from the diving Hellcat. This isn't the precision pecking of the Zero's armament. It is a chainsaw of ball and tracer ammunition. The rounds are incendiary and armor-piercing, traveling at 2,900 feet per second. They don't just hit Kudo's plane, they disassemble it. The Zero's wing root, unarmored and fragile, shreds instantly. The fuel tanks in the wings, lacking the self-sealing technology of their American counterpart, ignite in a blinding flash of white-orange flame. The cockpit fills with heat. The controls go slack in Kudo's hands. As his plane begins its final, burning tumble toward the jungle canopy, the last thing he sees isn't the sky. It is the silhouette of the two Hellcats, rejoining formation, banking away with disciplined, terrifying precision. They aren't just planes, they are flying tanks. And they are hunting in packs. October 1944. The Philippine Sea. Aboard the USS Essex CV-9. Cut to the deck of an American carrier. The contrast is jarring. Where the air over Rabaul was desperate and frantic, the flight deck of the Essex is a picture of organized chaos. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alex Vrachu climbs out of his cockpit. He is sweating, his flight suit stained with salt, but he is grinning. He walks around the nose of his F6F Hellcat. The ground crew is already swarming the plane. One mechanic runs a hand over a jagged hole in the horizontal stabilizer. He looks at Vrachu with wide eyes. "That's a 20mm hit, Lieutenant." "Missed the control cables by an inch." Vrachu shrugs, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. "Damn Zero got the drop on me while I was chasing a frantic Judy. Heard the bang, felt the kick. She just kept flying." He pats the fuselage of the Hellcat affectionately. It's covered in grime, oil, and soot. It's an ugly machine compared to the Spitfire or the Mustang. It has a pug nose and wide, flat wings. It looks like it was carved out of a solid block of aluminum. "Patch it up," Vrachu says, looking back out toward the horizon where the sun is setting over the Pacific. "I'm going back up in 2 hours." This was the reality that was beginning to dawn on the Japanese Empire. They were killing individual planes, but the pilots were coming back. The planes were coming back. The Japanese aces, the veterans who had trained for years to perfect their art, were dying. The American pilots, protected by 2,000 pounds of armor and engineering, were surviving their mistakes. They were learning, and they were getting deadlier with every sortie. But the Hellcat wasn't just a shield. It was about to prove it could be the ultimate sword. The next phase of the war wouldn't be about survival. It would be about extermination. June 19, 1944. 10 o'clock hours. Combat Information Center, KIC, USS Lexington. The room is dark, lit only by the eerie green glow of the radar scopes and the red battle lights. The air is stale, thick with cigarette smoke and the smell of ozone. A radar operator stares at his scope, his eyes narrowing. A blip appears, then another, then 10, then 50. The green phosphorescent smear grows until it looks like a solid landmass moving across the screen. But there is no land here. "This is the Philippine Sea. Raid 1 detected," the operator says, his voice tight but controlled. "Bearing 260. Distance, 150 miles. Angels 20. This is it." The Imperial Japanese Navy has emptied its carriers. They are throwing everything they have at the American fleet, hundreds of Zeros, Judy dive bombers, and Jill torpedo bombers. It is a hammer blow meant to break the U.S. Navy's back. But the Americans are not surprised. They have radar. And they have the Hellcat. Vector 270. "Scramble all fighters. Hey, Rube." The call goes out over the radios. "Hey, Rube," the circus code for brawl. 15 minutes later, 25,000 feet. Lieutenant Alex Vrachu is back in his cockpit, just as he promised. He leads a division of Hellcats toward the incoming swarm. He checks his gun sight. He checks his fuel. Below him, the American fleet is a sprawling city of steel. Ahead of him is the Japanese armada. When the two forces meet, it doesn't look like a dogfight. It looks like a collision. The Japanese pilots, flying the updated A6M Zeros, expect the Americans to wait defensively over their carriers. Instead, the Hellcats push out intercepting the raid 50 miles away from the ships. Vrachu spots a formation of Japanese dive bombers escorted by Zeros. He doesn't hesitate. He rolls his Hellcat and dives. The Hellcat screams downward, passing 350 knots. The airframe is solid as a rock. There is no shuddering, no loss of control. It is a stable, deadly gun platform. Vrachu lines up behind a Judy dive bomber. He presses the trigger for a short, 1-second burst. Dock, dock, dock. The 6.50 calibers shred the bomber's wing root. It flips over and disintegrates. Vrachu doesn't watch it fall. He is already pulling back on the stick, using the momentum of his heavy fighter to zoom climb back up into the sun. He spots a Zero trying to turn onto his tail. 2 years ago, in a Wildcat, Vrachu would have been dead. The Zero would have outturned him and filled his cockpit with lead. But today, Vrachu ignores the turn. He simply pushes the throttle of the Pratt & Whitney R2-800 double Wasp engine through the gate. The massive radial engine roars with 2,000 horsepower, dragging the Hellcat upward at a rate the Zero simply cannot match. The Japanese pilot stalls, hanging helplessly in the air, his engine gasping for power. Vrachu loops over the top, reversing his direction. He looks down at the stalled Zero. It's a sitting duck. He fires. The Zero explodes in a brilliant fireball. Splash 2, Vrachu mutters. All around him, the sky is raining burning aluminum. It is a massacre. The Japanese pilots are young, inexperienced, rushed through training to replace the veterans lost at Midway and Guadalcanal. They are flying fragile machines against American veterans in armored tanks. It's not a battle. It's target practice. Over the radio, you can hear the chatter of the American pilots. It sounds less like desperate combat and more like a turkey shoot at a county fair. I got one on the left. Brake right, I've got him. Look at that one burn. One American pilot, breathless and adrenaline-fueled, keys his mic. Hell, this is like an old-time turkey shoot down home. The name sticks. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By the time Vrachu lands back on the Lexington, he holds up 6 fingers to the deck crew. He shot down 6 enemy planes in 8 minutes. He has hardly used half his ammunition. The deck crew cheers, but the reality is sobering. The sky to the west is stained with black smoke trails, dozens of them, stretching down to the ocean. The F6F Hellcat has done something no other plane had done in history. It hasn't just defeated the enemy air force. It has broken its spirit. The Japanese sorties aren't returning. The carriers Taiho, Shikaku, and Hio are sinking or burning. The myth of the invincible Zero is dead, buried under the waves of the Philippine Sea. The Japanese Navy has lost over 400 aircraft in a single day. The U.S. Navy lost roughly 20 Hellcats in combat. The ratio is staggering, 19-1. But as the sun sets on the greatest carrier battle in history, the war takes a darker turn. The Japanese, realizing they can no longer fight the Hellcat in a fair duel, are about to change the rules of the game entirely. If they cannot shoot the Hellcats down, they will turn their own planes into missiles. October 25, 1944, 7:40 hours. The Sulu Sea, west of the Philippines. The radio frequency crackles, but this time there is no confident banter. There are no calls of Splash 1 or Get Him, boys. Instead, the voice of a forward air controller on the USS St. Lo screams through the static, edged with a terror that cuts through the noise of the engine. They're not turning away. Repeat, they are not turning away. They're diving on the ship. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell, the Navy's ace of aces, looks down from his Hellcat. He expects to see a dogfight. He expects to see the Japanese attempting to bomb and run. What he sees defies every instinct of aerial warfare. A Japanese Zero, loaded with a 500-pound bomb lashed to its belly, is in a terminal dive. The pilot isn't weaving. He isn't checking his 6. He isn't trying to survive. He is flying straight and level, a rigid arrow aimed directly at the flight deck of the escort carrier below. This is the kamikaze, the divine wind. For years, the Hellcat pilots had been trained to kill the enemy pilot. A burst to the cockpit, a hit to the engine, and the fight was over. The enemy would bail out or spin down. But how do you kill a machine that is already dead? How do you stop a weapon that wants to be destroyed? McCampbell Dives. The speedometer on his Hellcat wraps past 400 knots. He pulls the trigger. The 6.50 calibers roar. Tracers slam into the Zero's fuselage. Pieces of aluminum fly off. Smoke trails from the Japanese engine. In any other battle, this would be a kill. The Japanese pilot should be pulling up or bailing out. But the Zero keeps coming. The pilot inside is either dead or so consumed by fanatical purpose that his hands are locked onto the stick. McCampbell realizes with a jolt of horror that shooting it down isn't enough anymore. He has to erase it. He holds the trigger down. The Hellcat's guns heat up, spitting a continuous stream of armor-piercing incendiary rounds. He walks the fire from the Zero's tail up to the right wing root. He is trying to saw the plane in half. Crack. The Zero's right wing snaps off under the sheer weight of the lead. The plane violently rolls, aerodynamic forces finally overcoming the pilot's will. It misses the carrier's bridge by 50 feet and smashes into the ocean. A massive geyser of water and fire erupts, shaking the nearby ships. McCampbell pulls up, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looks around. There are more of them, dozens. The game has changed. The turkey shoot is over. This is no longer a sport, it is a zombie defense. April 6, 1945. Over Okinawa, Operation 10 Go. The sky over Okinawa is a chaotic mosaic of black flak bursts and burning debris. Flying defense for the fleet is a squadron of F6F Hellcats. This upgraded model is even tougher, with a redesigned engine cowling and spring tabs on the ailerons to boost maneuverability at high speeds. Ensign Bob Klingman is in the thick of it. He is at 30,000 feet, chasing a twin-engine Kawasaki Ki-45 Nick that is trying to reach the transport ships. Klingman pushes his Hellcat. He's closing the distance. He's at 10,000 feet, 20,000, 30,000. The air is so thin the engines are gasping. He gets within range and squeezes the trigger. Nothing. His guns are frozen. The high-altitude cold has jammed the lubricants. He cycles the charging handles. Still nothing. The Japanese bomber is getting away. It has a clear path to the American fleet below. If Klingman lets it go, hundreds of sailors could die. Klingman looks at his instruments. He looks at the enemy plane. Then, he looks at his own propeller, a massive, three-bladed steel Hamilton Standard prop, churning through the air like a meat grinder. He makes a decision that only a Hellcat pilot would dare. He slams the throttle forward. He isn't going to shoot the enemy down. He is going to chew him up. Klingman approaches the Japanese plane from the rear. He inches his Hellcat closer. 5 feet. 2 feet. Crunch. The sound is sickening metal shearing metal. Klingman drives his propeller directly into the tail and rudder of the Japanese bomber. The Hellcat shudders violently as its prop tips curl and chip, slicing through the enemy's control surfaces. The Japanese plane loses its tail. It flips over and plummets into the clouds, spinning out of control. Klingman's Hellcat is vibrating so hard the instrument panel is a blur. Pieces of the Japanese plane are embedded in his cowling. His propeller looks like a mangled spoon. But the Pratt & Whitney engine doesn't quit. The rugged Grumman airframe holds together. He limps back to base, the plane shaking like a washing machine with a brick inside. When he lands, the ground crew stares in disbelief. They find pieces of the enemy plane wedged in the Hellcat's oil cooler. They ask him what happened. Klingman just wipes the oil from his face. It was the only way to stop him. This was the legacy of the Hellcat. It wasn't just a fighter plane anymore. It was a battering ram. It was a shield of aluminum and steel standing between the desperate fury of an empire and the vulnerable decks of the U.S. Navy. But even as the Hellcats held the line in the sky, the Japanese had one final, terrifying surprise. A weapon not flown by a pilot, but guided by a human soul. A rocket-powered nightmare that moved faster than any Hellcat could catch. The Oka, March 21, 1945, 14 o'clock hours, 50 miles off the coast of Kyushu. The radar scopes on the American carriers are glowing with a terrifying new signature. It isn't a swarm of bees this time. It is a small, tight formation of Betty bombers, lumbering low and fast toward the fleet. But it's what they are carrying that turns the blood of intelligence officers into ice. Slung beneath the belly of each bomber is a small, winged cylinder. It looks like a torpedo with wings. The Japanese call it the Oka cherry blossom. The Americans have a different name for it, the Baka bomb. Japanese for idiot. But there is nothing idiotic about the physics. The Oka is a rocket-powered, human-guided missile. Once dropped, 3 solid propellant rockets ignite, pushing the craft to speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour in a dive. No propeller plane in the world can catch it. If the Oka is released, a ship is going to die. Lieutenant Commander Thatch, the man who invented the weave, knows the math. The Hellcat has a top speed of roughly 380 knots. The Oka does 530 knots in level flight. You cannot dogfight a missile. The orders go out to the Hellcat squadrons. Ignore the escorts. Ignore the fighters. Kill the mothers. High above the Pacific, a division of Hellcats spots the formation of Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers. They are miles out, desperately trying to get within launch range of the American carriers. The Hellcats drop their external fuel tanks. The Ironworks fighters shed their weight and become predators. They don't slide into a dogfight. They execute a high-speed slash. The Japanese Zero's flying escort try to intervene, buzzing around the Hellcats like angry wasps. But the Americans simply blow through them. The Hellcat's armor shrugs off the light machine gun fire of the Zeros. The pilots don't even flinch. Their eyes are locked on the bombers. A Hellcat dives on the lead bomber. The pilot waits holding his fire until he is within 300 yards. He unleashes a storm of 50 caliber rounds into the Betty's wing tanks. The Japanese bomber, laden with fuel and the explosive rocket beneath it, doesn't just crash. It vaporizes. A shockwave of orange fire ripples through the sky, then another, and another. The Hellcats tear through the formation like wolves in a sheep pen. They hammer the bombers with such ferocity that the Japanese pilots are forced to jettison their Oka rockets uselessly into the sea just to gain maneuverability. It is a slaughter. Of the 16 bombers that sortied that day, not a single one returns. The unstoppable weapon is stopped cold not by a miracle weapon, but by the rugged, reliable, and lethal efficiency of the Hellcat. July 1945. Over the Japanese mainland. The war has moved. The ocean is no longer the battlefield. Now the Hellcats are prowling the skies over Japan itself. For the Japanese civilians on the ground, the sight is terrifying. For years they were told their island was a fortress protected by the divine wind. Now, the dark blue fighters with the white stars are buzzing their rooftops. The Hellcats are no longer just hunting planes. They are hunting the infrastructure of an empire. They strafe airfields, trains, and factories. At Kura Naval Arsenal, the remnants of the Imperial Navy are hiding in the harbor. The Hellcats descend. They carry rockets, now 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, HVARs. A flight of Hellcats lines up on a Japanese destroyer docked in the bay. They don't need dive bombers. The fighters are the bombers. They fire their rockets, blowing gaping holes in the warship's hull, then rake the deck with machine gun fire as they pull out. The dominance is total. The Hellcat pilots are so confident in their machines that they are flying with their canopies open, the humid summer air blasting into the cockpit, looking for targets of opportunity. But the enemy is cornered, and a cornered animal bites. August 15, 1945, 5:40 hours. Near Tokyo, Lieutenant Junior Grade Muggsy McGrath is flying combat air patrol off the coast. It's early morning. The sun is just cresting the horizon, painting the Pacific in shades of gold and blood. Suddenly, a bogey. A Judy dive bomber screaming down from the clouds, desperate to put a bomb onto an American deck before the end. McGrath pushes his Hellcat. He is tired. The war has been going on for what feels like a lifetime, but the training kicks in, the muscle memory. He closes in. The Japanese plane fills his sight. This is the grim reality of the Hellcat's war. It started with desperate defense against a superior enemy. It is ending with the methodical, industrial dismantling of that enemy. McGrath fires. The Judy smokes and dives into the water. He doesn't cheer. He just checks his 6 and rejoins formation. Minutes later, a voice crackles over the radio. It isn't a frantic call for help. It isn't a target designation. It is the voice of the Admiral broadcast across the entire fleet. All stations, cease fire, cease fire. The Japanese have surrendered. The war is over. McGrath looks down at his instrument panel. He looks at the trigger on his flight stick, the trigger he has squeezed 1,000 times in nightmares and reality. He eases his grip. The engine of the Hellcat hums a steady, rhythmic beat that has carried thousands of boys across the largest ocean on Earth and brought them home as men. Below him, the guns of the fleet fall silent. The flak clouds dissipate. For the first time in 4 years, the sky is just sky. But as the pilots turn their heavy blue planes back toward the carriers, a realization begins to set in. They are flying the most successful fighter plane in naval history. But the cost of that success is etched into every rivet, every patch on the aluminum skin, and every empty bunk back in the ready room. The shooting is over, but the legend is just beginning. September 2, 1945, Tokyo Bay. The ink dries on the surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri. The greatest conflict in human history is officially over. But thousands of miles away, on the flight decks of carriers steaming toward San Francisco and San Diego, the real story of the Pacific War sits silently in the salt spray. Rows of F6F Hellcats are chained to the decks. They don't look like the parade ground Spitfires or the sleek, racing-striped Mustangs of Europe. They look like prize fighters who went 15 rounds. Their paint is faded by the tropical sun. Their cowlings are dented. Their wings are patched with scrap metal. They are ugly, bulky, and scarred. And they are the most lethal weapon the U.S. Navy has ever owned. As the pilots pack their sea bags, the numbers begin to circulate. The statisticians and intelligence officers run the final tally, and the results are almost impossible to believe. In just 2 years of combat, the F6F Hellcat was credited with destroying 5,163 enemy aircraft. It accounted for 75% of all aerial victories recorded by the U.S. Navy in the Pacific. But the most staggering number isn't the kills, it's the ratio. For every one Hellcat lost in aerial combat, 19 Japanese planes were shot down. A kill ratio of 19-1. It is a statistic that has never been matched in the history of aerial warfare, and likely never will be. The Japanese designers had bet everything on the philosophy of the samurai sword: speed, sharpness, and a willingness to die. The Zero was a masterpiece of agility, but it treated its pilot as a disposable component. The Grumman engineers bet on a different philosophy: the Iron Works. They built a plane that prioritized the man inside. They wrapped him in armor, gave him a self-sealing fuel tank, and put a massive, reliable engine in front of him. The result was the Ace Maker, The Hellcat produced 305 fighter aces, more than any other American fighter. It took farm boys from Iowa and factory workers from Detroit pilots with barely a fraction of the flight time of the Japanese veterans and turned them into survivors. It forgave their mistakes. It absorbed the punishment that would have killed a Zero pilot 10 times over, and it brought them home. Fade 2, a modern museum hangar. Present day. A spotlight hits the dark blue fuselage of a restored F6F. It sits heavy on its landing gear, the grinning Grumman mouth painted on the engine cowling. You can walk up to it. You can knock your knuckles against the aluminum skin. It sounds solid, dull, heavy. It doesn't look fast. It doesn't look elegant. But if you look closely at the cockpit glass, you can almost see the ghost of the Zero pilot who first saw this plane over Rabaul in 1943. You can imagine the smirk on his face as he saw the bulky American fighter lumbering toward him. You can imagine his laughter. And then, you can imagine the terrifying realization that followed when the bullets bounced off. The brick turned on a dime, and the hunter became the hunted. The Japanese pilots laughed at the Hellcat. But in the end, the Hellcat had the final word. It didn't just win the dogfight. It cleared the sky.